name is Mary, and this is the story of my life. My fiancé jilted me on the day that ought to be our wedding day. That very day has become a day I'll never forget in my entire life. This was how it all started. I met Steve while I was working as a maid in the city. I came from a poor family background. My parents are peasant farmers who live in the village. After my secondary school, my parents couldn't afford enrolling me into the university. Therefore, I had to leave the village for the city in search of greener pastures when I was 22 years. Fortunately, I got a job as a maid in the home of a nice and wealthy family. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson were a mid-aged couple who lived in a well-furnished duplex in the city. They had just one child, a son who was schooling abroad at the time I was working with them. They were so nice and caring to me to the extent that they enrolled me into a driving school and gave me one of their cars after I had learned driving. I would go with my car to the supermarket, salon, church, and every other places I had to go to. I felt like not leaving that house because I wasn't lacking anything. My salary was attractive and I was able to save up a good amount of money from it. A few years later, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson encouraged me to acquire a skill, and I was enrolled into a prestigious fashion school. All expenses were paid by Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. Oh, I was so happy. I said to myself, these are the destiny helpers I have been praying for. After I graduated from the fashion school, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson began to make plans on setting up a fashion shop on my behalf. It was during that period that Steve came into my life. I wish our paths never crossed. I met Steve in a salon one fateful day I went to braid my hair. He was such a tall and handsome young man with great charming looks. When I was about leaving the salon, he approached me and asked for my phone number. Without hesitation, I gave him my contact and we became friends from that very day. Prior to the time I met Steve, I had been so desperate to settle down because I was almost 29 then. I felt like time wasn't on my side anymore. The previous guys I dated before Steve all jilted me after they found out that I was just a maid to the Thompson's family. Due to this fact, I decided never to tell any guy I would meet that I work as a maid. Steve absolutely swept me off my feet. He possessed so many qualities I was looking for in a man. I thought I had found my Mr. Right. He had great communication skill. We discuss over the phone almost every day. He always calls me before going to bed as well. I saw him as a complete gentleman. He was educated with good accent as well. We hung out a lot and he was fun to be with. I never saw that he was a wolf in sheep clothing. I was so much in love with Steve to the extent that I began to tell him all my future plans, including the huge amount of money I had saved up in my bank account. Few weeks after revealing all that to Steve, he proposed marriage to me. I was so surprised because I didn't see that coming. We haven't even dated up to 3 months. I accepted his proposal and we started making wedding plans. He came to visit Mr. and Mrs. Thompson and they found him as a gentleman. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson later called me and advised me to take my time. They suggested that I shouldn't rush the wedding, rather I should know more about Steve because they felt like 3 months wasn't enough to know whom I would be spending the rest of my life with. I took that advice from them
discussed it with Steve, but he told me that he didn't want us to cut for long. I thought about his own decision and also how compatible we were. I waved aside Mr. and Mrs. Thompson's advice and continued with the wedding plan. Oh, I regret not taking that very advice. As we were making plans for the wedding, Steve called me one fateful day and asked me to lend him 1 million naira. I asked him why, and he said that his saving account was frozen, which made it difficult for him to access his money during that period. He pleaded to me that he needed the 1 million naira for an urgent business deal that would likely generate more money, which he intended to use for sponsoring our wedding. Oh, I fell for that. After giving Steve the 1 million naira, he promised to visit my parents for proper introduction. I first visited his mother. She was such an affable and accommodating woman. I was so impressed because her type was exactly the kind of mother-in-law I have been praying to have. Steve also visited my parents at the village, and they welcomed him with open arms. Few weeks after he visited my parents, he came back with some of his kinsmen to my village. They came with some cakes of Hawaii to ask for my hands in marriage. The bride price list was given to them, and his family promised to come do the needful. I realized that after that very period, Steve started giving me attitude. He no longer calls me on phone as he used to. I wasn't bothered much about it because his mother was frequently calling me during that period. Steve was the only child of his late father, therefore his mother really wanted him to settle down as soon as possible, and she was putting in all her support to make sure that the traditional wedding held. 3 weeks after he visited my village, I asked Steve for the 1 million naira he borrowed from me, but he kept telling me to be patient and promised to give me the money before our wedding. As the wedding preparation was going on, Mr. Thompson called me one fateful day and gave me a check of 1 million naira. Oh my goodness, I was so happy. He told me to use the money to start up life after my wedding. I told Steve about the money that Mr. Thompson gave me, and he came to the house to thank the couple. Some days later, Steve asked me to also lend him the 1 million naira that Mr. Thompson gave me. This time around, I was reluctant to give him the money, but he kept cajoling me to release the money to him. It almost led to a dispute. Finally, I succumbed and gave him that money. He would say to me then, "Are we not getting married soon? Won't I be the one to take care of you in this marriage? Give me this money, let me invest it so that more money would come." Those were his words. Those were the words he used in deceiving me. Oh, I can't believe that I was so dumb. I was a typical example of a fool for love. To cut the long story short, Steve didn't give me back that 2 million naira and our wedding was almost approaching. I had just 500,000 naira left in my bank account. He kept giving me silly excuses about the investment he did with the money that was yet to yield returns. I thought about that whole thing and decided to sponsor the traditional wedding with just the 500,000 naira left in my bank account. I made the wedding invitation cards, bought and sewed all our outfit for the traditional wedding, bought all the food items that was made that very day, rented the chairs and canopy, paid for the venue decoration, bought all sorts of drinks. In short, I single-handedly sponsored that very wedding. I literally spent the whole 500,000 naira in my bank account. I did all that with a joyful heart because I wanted my wedding to be a colorful occasion. Steve and his people were yet to pay my bride price because according to my people's tradition, the day a woman's bride price is paid, that would be the same day the traditional wedding would take place. So Steve and his people were supposed to come with a bride price item on that very day the wedding was fixed. A week to the wedding day, we both traveled to our respective hometowns to prepare for the wedding.